views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren, Jaime, and of course, we thank you for joining us. As always, we here on the Social Justice Forums provide a platform where we share multiple points of view. We talk about the inequities that many people face, and then at the same time, we also promote civic engagement and some civic understanding. We want you to stay tuned today because we have a very special show. It's a very special guest. The Social Justice Forums starts right now. And welcome back. We'll get right into it. Our very first guest grew up as the daughter of immigrants and learning early in life the importance of hard work and community. She's proudly helped lead the fight for critical reform, including prohibiting racial profiling, funding gang prevention programs, and increasing grand jury transparency, as well as ensuring speedy trials and fixing the city's broken bail system. Joining us now to share a little bit more on this matter, I'm joined by New York State Assemblymember of District 80, Natalia Fernandez. And Natalia, good to have you.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Glad to have you sharing with us. And so tell us a little bit as we are getting into the thick of things here, getting close towards the summertime. A lot of things are still on the horizon, but most of all, really, all of us are still trying to navigate through COVID-19. So give us a little bit of insight as to where your district is right now in regards to COVID-19.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for having me on this morning. Well, my district, the 80th Assembly District right here in the Northeast Bronx, has been hit hard by COVID. My district is central, if not surrounding, to many healthcare facilities, including major hospitals, Jacobi, Montefiore, North Central Bronx, Einstein, and numerous nursing homes, Pelham Parker Nursing Home, Morris Park Nursing Home, Morningside. So when the pandemic hit, it really shook us up a lot. And early on, we saw infection rates very high right here in our district, 10469 zip code, 10467 zip code. So the urgency was immediate to get assistance to our healthcare professionals that early on were not getting the proper protective equipment like masks and gloves and PPEs. I partnered with community groups to help give those products, as we had them. And then also seeing how we can fight the food insecurity that hit a lot of people abruptly. Many people had to stop working, were furloughed, lost their jobs, had to halt their business, and it became a real dire need for food to survive. So working with companies like Great Performances Catering, ICNA Relief, doing as many pop-ups as we can throughout the district just to help Bronxites as best as we could before we got to legislation that was really needed to help pause evictions, because with no money and no job, people couldn't pay their rents, and we had to make sure that they weren't losing their homes because of it, but also helping the small businesses as best as we could. And it has been a long battle. This has been a long year. We're now hitting the 1-year mark of it. But I'm very grateful for the work that we did accomplish last year and recently to help get rent relief programs, $100 million from the last stimulus package. Now in this budget, we got another $500 million for rent relief, and also $1 billion for small businesses to help with their rent and utility bills.
Well, let's unpack a little bit of that right there. When you talk about where we are, as a people, first of all, we know that the number is really high in your district, right? So are you satisfied with what you're seeing by way of vaccination rollout and the amount of people being vaccinated so far?
No, not immediately. It was something that I have been working on since the vaccine became available. And we're fortunate that Jacobi Hospital and North Central Hospital, or, our hospitals here, had the vaccine, but in communities that, where populations still had difficulty traveling to the hospitals, or even Yankee Stadium, which was a big help for the Bronx, and I was the first to call for it, to say that we need a mass vaccination site and it should be somewhere like Yankee Stadium. It was still very difficult for my district to get there. So I had been pushing and fighting and asking everybody under the sun, the governor, the mayor, and any healthcare agency, institution, to bring vaccination sites to my community centers, to my senior centers, to the catering hall that has not been open for months, for a year. And unfortunately, we couldn't get many of those acts completed. But as time went on and the vaccine became more available, our local healthcare providers have been able to administer it. So now, just this week, I partnered up with VIP Community Health Services to bring a pop-up vaccine site right at Columbus High School in the center of the 80th.
Yeah, I want to talk about businesses in your district as well, because when we talk about COVID-19, we know that the high impacts, particularly on small businesses. You look at the borough of the Bronx, we're made up of a lot of small businesses, and particularly right there in your district. A lot of them said, listen, when it came to PPP and the opportunity to get that paycheck protection program, they were denied the opportunity. And now small business is really looking and asking a question, where do we go from here? What answers can you give them?
Well, the state application has still to be released, and it should be in the next couple weeks. And I say like, couple, very few. But there is an application that will be available for small business owners that have not been able to pay rent, that have not been able to pay utilities, even some payroll to employees, and to help them catch up on the debt that they've been accumulating. But our small businesses have been hurting in so many other ways as well. The shutdown put strict regulations, either close your doors, strict hours, must wear masks, must have all proper safety precautions in place. And many businesses did comply, but in the beginning, there was an issue with language transparency. So a lot of this information was not available in the language of the business owner at times, and it caused confusion, and it caused them to get fined, and it just now added to their debt. And our restaurants too have been suffering a lot with this. Understanding, that it was very, very critical early on to not have restaurants open, but the lack of patronage and customers certainly pushed them back. Not every restaurant could do delivery. And then when outside dining started, not every little restaurant had a space for outside dining. So there is certainly a need to want more hours of business. And with all safety precautions in place, I know a lot of people are ready and have complied and can do it. But it's just also a factor that, and this is the small businesses speaking to me, that they feel that, the agencies have been a little overbearing and looking for any reason to fine them. And there have been restaurants that have been closed early on, got fined $25,000 and still are not able to open and still owe that money. So that's something that I want to look into. Why are we now holding them with this debt for something that necessarily wasn't intentionally to hurt anybody, So
Yeah.
it's certainly an uphill battle. And for the relief that is to come in various ways in the city and the state, we want to just get that information and help them fill out the paperwork, guide them through it, because a lot of it's complicated, and a lot of it, you need records from years past and payroll, histories to show for it. So getting all that information together is something that a lot of our businesses need help on, because especially the small business owners, it's only one employee. So imagine them trying to run their business, do everything that they have to do to keep compliance, and then also get everything together for the relief applications. It's certainly a lot for them.
Yeah. I want to talk about community for a moment, because obviously in our community, there's still a lot of quality of life issues. One, across New York City, the rise in anti-Semitic hate. The fact that there's so many people who are still perpetrating hate these days is something we should have to be talking about. But yet and still, it's happening. And it's happening in the Jewish community prevalently. It's happening in the Asian community. So give me a little bit about your take on particularly those two areas and what we're seeing.
Well, it's incredibly sad that we are still seeing these instances, especially to the Jewish community. And recently, when it was Holocaust Memorial Day, I was so shocked to see on social media and even in some conversations that people don't believe the Holocaust happened. So, that could be a reason why there is continued hate, because we're not talking about what had happened before when we let the hate go array. So it's terribly sad to see, and something that we must be vigilant about, continue to stand up against it, to continue to call it out, and as much as we can get it to the masses on social media, on news, on TV, educate our neighbors that this is not what we are about. This is not what we can allow to happen. Because if you let one community get attacked, any community is open to attack. And look what's happening to our Asian and Pacific Islander community. Unfortunately, rhetoric, I think, by our former president has led to this hate, this animosity towards our Asian community members, and it's resulting in harm, and we have to keep standing against it.
Do you believe that in terms of just public, being able to get along and being, the COVID is kind of like also exacerbated our tensions between racial and just, day-to-day dialogue between people. That so many people have COVID fatigue now. I'm not using that as an excuse, but I'm also saying it's also a part of what I think people are navigating with that translates in some of this behavior.
I could agree on that because yes, COVID has gave everybody anxiety, has given a lot of people, paranoia of what tomorrow can look like, what's going to happen to me today, what can happen to my neighbor next week. So that pent up anger emotion, a lot of people have it. And I can't say that that is a reason, but I could believe, yeah, it's something tied to it as a result of COVID and what it's done to our our social lives, our ability to, be around and learn from your neighbor has certainly been restricted. So yeah, I could say that there is a tie to that.
Yeah. You talked about what tomorrow looks like. I want to talk about what tomorrow looks like. For you, you have a desire to see a greener Bronx, and you've got a greener plan. I want you to take the time to let a little bit of our viewers know exactly how you see this greener plan playing out for the borough of the Bronx.
Absolutely. Well, I have this plan for the Bronx, for the whole borough, not just the 80th, because I am running for Bronx Borough President. But this is an area that we must be vigilant on, and we must come at bold and strong and really work towards real solutions. The Bronx has a long history of environmental injustices. Environmental racism has really left our community suffering. We have Asthma Alley here because of the infrastructure that has been built. That is allowing emissions in cars to stay in our communities and stay in the air. And we need to really address that and look at solutions, like many of my colleagues and myself have been talking, capping the cross Bronx to stop the emissions from coming into our neighborhoods, but also bringing renewable energies and new infrastructure, green infrastructure that will not only help the borough stay healthy, purify the air and help, our waterways and city systems, but also bringing jobs. This is an economy, a market that is here, and we must work towards getting it, because if we don't, we're losing a great opportunity to better our communities, to bring jobs to our communities, but really an opportunity of survival. Like, we only got one planet, we got one borough here, and we need to make sure that we're absolutely taking care of it so the generations here and later don't grow up with the ailments that we see us having, like asthma and comorbidities.
We're known as the borough of parks. The Bronx is, that borough that is known of many as having tremendous parks and beautiful parks. A lot of people are concerned about what's going to happen in the future by way of park space. So can you address a little bit about, what you think is going to happen by way of park space, and what can we do to better improve the Bronx park space that we have?
Absolutely. Thank you, because I love our park space. We are the greenest borough, and tying into, our green plan, we must have the greenest solutions. And I've been a strong advocate to say that as the borough with the most green space, we should have the highest parks budget, because it's a lot of work to take care of our green space here, making sure that the ecosystems are healthy, making sure that, our parks are clean, that they're not getting hurt by the trash and contaminants that, unfortunately some people leave. So I want to see our parks well taken care of, but also giving support to our community groups that have been taking care of our parks. Because as much as the budget has been hurt in different ways throughout the years, less park workers, less park managers, less maintenance, less hours doing that, we have wonderful groups in our borough: Friends of Mosholu Parkland, Friends of Pelham Parkway, Friends of Pelham Bay Park, Van Cortlandt Alliance. These are organizations that have dedicated their time and energy and sometimes, their own money to make sure that our parks are kept clean and that everyone can enjoy them. So I think that we need to start helping them. And if it's with a little bit of funding, to really continue the good work that we love in our parks, expanding community gardens and getting people more interactive in their green space, maybe bringing up specific tours, walking days, because there are trails within our parks that connect each other. So these are things that we should be promoting, we should be enjoying, and again, taking care of it. So pick up after yourselves, don't barbecue in the park, and make sure that you are leaving it better for yourself and for your neighbor.
You mentioned a little bit earlier, stole my thunder a little bit, that you are running for Bronx Borough President. It's no secret. We want to talk about that for a bit. You got it. You stole my thunder, but it's all right. So talk to us about your decision to wanting to run for Bronx Borough President, and why you think you're the choice.
Well, I love this borough. I absolutely do. This borough, like you said, I'm the daughter of immigrants. It gave my family life. It gave them a chance at the American dream. And it gave me a real purpose to really deliver for the people that I love and care about in my community, in my home. And in this time where it is such a pivotal moment for not just the Bronx, but New York City governance, we need bold leadership. We need new ideas. We need a fresh face, a new perspective, a different way of approaching things. And I know I am that candidate because that's how I've been since becoming an assembly member. I have the experience having worked in government my entire career, even at the executive level, being the Bronx representative under the governor's office. So I'm the only candidate that served borough-wide, but also one that has true energy to really address and be present for the borough. I am very proud to say that I have never lied to my community, misled them, always bringing full transparency into what I do and really leading with my heart and compassion. And that's what this borough needs right now. We need somebody who's going to love it, take care of it, nurture it, and really guide them to the future, to what we need to, where we need to be. You know, we have to get on this path of sustainability. We have to get back on track. We have so much potential here in the growth to come, but also with the talent and the originality that the Bronx continues to give to New York City. So I'm ready for the task. I have the energy, the integrity, and again, the experience to make sure that the Bronx is never left behind. It is never second place. You'll always be hearing at the Boogie Down Bronx because shorty or not, I got my soapbox and I'm gonna come up and make sure you know what's going on in the Bronx and what we need.
I think when you talk about the borough of the Bronx, obviously a lot of people will say we're doing better. And there was once a time when the Bronx was burning, as the analogy is, and then we went from a place where the Bronx is booming. But now the big question, I mean, right now is coming out of COVID-19 is how are we going to be able to fare? I mean, we're number 62 out of all counties in terms of health. You've got the unemployment rate that is really, that has seen better, but now with coming out of COVID-19, that could possibly drop back down again. What do you think is the biggest challenge for you, if elected, hitting that seat right off the gate that you'd have to tackle?
Jobs and careers. That's something that I want Bronxites to get every chance at, every opportunity for. And that starts at our education system, making sure that our children are fully supported in every area that they may need. Making sure that we have the after school programs, the gifted and talented programs, the educational support, maybe having our buildings open later, our school buildings open later. You know, these are institutions, pillars in our community that should be utilized more. During the day, our kids can do their 9 to 5 of schoolwork, but then the second half of the day, we should open up these buildings for CTE courses, vocational courses, the trades. This borough is developing and there's a lot of work to be done here, and we want Bronxites to be a part of it. So we need workforce development institutions. We need to bring job training, and every project development to come, we need to make sure that they offer an apprenticeship program. So not only are we getting people a job to be in that project, but training them for the next job, setting themselves up for a career that they can carry with them throughout the city and throughout the borough. But also making sure that we are giving opportunity to a minority and small business owners. I mentioned before that we have great talent here. We have original new businesses. They need to be a part of these big plans because we want them to start and succeed here and then be able to take it to the rest of the borough. We have restaurants, Caridades, which is basically our own chain restaurant. I want to see more Caridades and no more McDonald's. So I'm ready to empower the people of the Bronx, get them the proper education training that they need, and get them working again and giving them the support that they need to get their doors open or to start a new business. And I intend to do that with my small business task force in conjunction with BOEDC, the Bronx Economic Development Corporation, because we need Bronxites surviving and thriving.
I got a little in 2 minutes, probably an unfair question, but I'm gonna throw it in there. So much to talk about, and thank you for that. But police community relations, I mean, obviously that's huge too, right? You got about 2 minutes to unpack for me. How do you envision police community relations going forward under your administration or even right now?
Communication and accountability. That's the two areas that I think we need to focus on more to build better the relationship between police and community, because we've seen the tension this last year and really the warranted, actually, yeah, the warranted attention to the issues that many people have been suffering for generations. Unfair police tactics, lethal police tactics that should be limited. So we need to have the conversation in our communities between police and community about what change we want to see. What do we feel and how you need to be better? And that's something that I focused on in the assembly in my time. I've introduced the Andrew Kearse Act. It's a bill that was named after a Bronx resident, Andrew Kearse, who died in the backseat of a police car while having a heart attack and was begging for life. I can't breathe. Please, officer, help me. Open the window. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. The officer laughed and scoffed him off and he died. So we need to change the mindset and really the training of police officers and how they treat us and how they approach situations. Not only should we be not giving the police every problem under the sun, there are a lot of emergencies that don't need police force. Mental health crises we see all the time. We shouldn't be bringing a police officer with a gun to de-escalate it. That's not de-escalation. We need to really look at bringing healthcare professionals, mental health professionals into the ring of these crises to help people and not scare them and not hurt them. So I'm ready to tackle this head on to make sure that our CCRB, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, is strengthened and people are actually seeing justice, that police officers are held accountable, because like any area, any person, you do something wrong, you must be held accountable. That is justice. So the more that we bring accountability into the police force, I think there will be further understanding and a better pathway to peace. But the gun violence, we declare gun violence a public health crisis here in the state, because it is literally killing people. That's what guns do. But we were fortunate to get $10 million more into the state budget to help community intervention programs. I really do believe it takes a village to raise anybody, to raise your neighbors, your community. And part of that is teaching each other, guiding each other. Sometimes a police officer isn't as welcoming or giving that sense of comfort to some young people and others in general that are going through life. There's so many things in life that bring a person to go to choose violence. So our community intervention programs are made and run by people from the community that have lived these experiences, that are aware of the conversations happening on the ground and can stop the violence before it happens. In my district, we have Standing Up to Violence that we've seen statistically has lowered gun violence in its years of service. COVID-19, this past pandemic, it surged through the roof. And I do believe a lot of it is because of the trauma that we felt and the struggles that we're going through. So addressing all this, I think we can get to a place where we are seeing less guns on the street, making sure we stop them from getting on the street. So gun manufacturers need to be held accountable too, because they need to control where their guns are going. And we need to guide people away from that life. More community centers, more job opportunities, youth development, and really getting the resources to the people.
Yeah. Natalia Fernandez, we're going to have to leave it there. Assemblymember Natalia Fernandez, that would be correct. All right. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Social Justice Forums. And of course, you have an open door to make sure to come on back and let us know what's going on in the district and also how things are progressing with you in the candidacy. Thank you so much for being with us here on the Social Justice Forums.
Thank you so much. It was a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And I will be back.
All righty. Listen, we're taking a quick break. We have more show. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be back with the Social Justice Forums in a moment.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
And welcome back. The Urban Indigenous Collective mission is to drive inclusion of urban natives and ensuring cultural humility in health and wellness services to build more equitable, inclusive, and prosperous communities. Now, through acknowledgement and respect, they envision a world where the gap of health inequalities no longer holds back urban natives. And our next guest has actually dedicated to improving innovative solutions to Indigenous health. Joining us now to provide their point of view on the matter, I'm joined by the President and Executive Director at Urban Indigenous Collective, Sutton King. And Sutton, good to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Poso Shogoli.
Thank you. So listen, when we talk about your mission, for somebody who may not be so familiar with the Urban Indigenous Collective, give us a little background.
Sure. So, as you shared, the Urban Indigenous Collective really is advocating on the behalf of urban natives to really ensure that we have access to culturally appropriate healthcare services. It's really important to understand the background and the context as it relates to Indigenous people. So, Indigenous peoples here in North America are the only group of folks who are born with the legal right to healthcare, right? And this is based on a sacred bargain, we'll call it, also known as treaties between a lot of different nations and the United States government, right? And this sacred bargain really promised to ensure that Native Americans had the access to health and wellness services to really be able to live healthy lives. And unfortunately, when we look at Indian Health Service today, it is grossly underfunded. And that really causes a lot of issues in terms of access to healthcare. And we really hope to create a safety net here in New York City, in the greater tri-state area, to ensure that Indigenous peoples have what they need, not only to survive, but quite frankly, thrive.
Yeah. Talk about the disparities in healthcare. I mean, we talk about these all the time, the racial disparities, but let's bring in Indigenous people here. Talk about what maybe somebody does not know when it comes to Indigenous people with regards to healthcare.
Sure. Well, Native Americans experience some of the most paramount burdens of disease, death, and disability nationally. Urban Natives experience chronic and infectious adverse health disparities, mental health illness, and substance abuse addiction, which is perpetuated by poverty, racism, discrimination, and again, a lack of access to quality health services. When we look at the data, specifically the public health data looking at urban Indigenous folks, it's virtually non-existent, right? And so here we are with this issue of not really being able to understand the true impact that some of these health morbidities and mortalities have in our communities. And so it's really important to be able to have access to that data so that we're able to really advocate, organize, and request the proper funding to support our communities. And so that's why one of the main focuses of Urban Indigenous Collective is research and data. Again, when we don't have the data, it's virtually impossible for us to be able to organize and implement programming that can support those adverse health consequences that I have just described. And so a lot of the research shows us that we are the most impacted by mental health disparities. Again, we saw that the U.S. Suicide rate is up 33% since 1999, right? But for Native Americans and Alaska Natives, that increase is even greater. For women, it's up 139%. For men, respectively, it's 71%. And we have accumulated just immeasurable amounts of historical and intergenerational trauma within the United States. I think when we look at the historical exposure to loss of land and life through cultural destruction, catastrophic disease, we are not, this is not new to us, catastrophic disease, right? As we look at what's happening with COVID, this is something that we've experienced with first contact when we look at what happened with smallpox and other diseases such as syphilis, and quite frankly, warfare and violence. And again, coupled with this ongoing experience of poverty and discrimination, it's really subjected us to substantial difficulties, as well as the historical losses due to genocide, and really witnessing these violent events and the current experience of loss that we are dealing with due to COVID-19. And so when we look at mental health within our communities, we see that Native youth are actually experiencing PTSD at a rate of 22%, which is actually the same rate as veterans returning from Iraq or Afghanistan. And so we know that our youth are suffering here the most. And when we look at ages 10 to 24, actually, ages 10 to 24, suicide is the second leading cause of death. And again, that the Native youth rate is just paramount. And we're looking at a suicide rate within our youth of 2.5 times higher than the overall national average.
What are we learning about that? Because when you talk about suicide, I mean, you think about suicide in young people, and it's tragic enough as it is, but then to have it at the high alarming rate that you have it, root causes, possible, give me some insight here.
Right. So, I think we're looking at just, again, a lack of access to culturally tailored resources. Let's look at the landscape here in New York City, for example, right? So Indian Health Service is the federal agency tasked with really supporting, again, Natives with access to mental health and health resources. Unfortunately, here in New York City, the closest Indian Health Service or IHS clinic is actually 4 hours away in Oneida, New York. So for me, as a Native person who has legal right to free healthcare, I am not able to access that unless I am able to get in a car or organize transportation 4 hours out and then 4 hours back, right? And that is just not possible for a lot of folks. A lot of people don't have access to vehicles or transportation out there. And so, I think we see the Shinnecock tribe out in Long Island who do have a health clinic, and that's really exceptional and really important. However, it's not intertribal. And so there really is this need for a healthcare center or a mental health care center for urban Natives in New York City. And so when we don't have the resources to really be able to address the compounding health consequences that we face, unfortunately, it really leaves us desperate without any resources to really be able to support, again, that healing and wellness.
Let me get into the impact of COVID-19. I mean, we talk all the time about how it impacts various communities. I don't think enough conversation has been had on Native Americans and what that really looks like. But give us an in-depth perspective from your point of view as to the impact of COVID-19, particularly in the Native American community.
Absolutely. The impact of COVID-19, again, has been devastating for our communities. Myself personally, I have lost 5 either family members or close friends or relatives. And that's not a unique story for folks who are Indigenous. But what's happening here is that we know we are being disproportionately impacted. However, when we look at the data, there is, again, a gap. You can go to the Department of Health here in New York City's website on COVID-19 and the mortality and the morbidity, and you're going to see that there is no disaggregated data for urban Indigenous peoples, right? We are lumped in with other, and that makes it virtually impossible, again, to be able to understand the true impact that this virus is having on our communities, right? And so we're trying to fight this virus to stay alive, but we are virtually invisible in the data, and which I think perpetuates this false narrative that urban Natives are not here and that urban Natives are not being impacted by COVID-19. So what we really need is folks to help us to really be able to understand where that data lies and how we are being impacted. And I really do hope that the Department of Health takes a closer look at this so that we are able to, again, organize and provide our community with the right resources.
Let me ask you the question about what does it feel like? I mean, you just said something, you kind of move kind of quickly, but if anybody heard you and unpacked that, you said you go to an application, you fill out on an application other, right? So that means that your people are not being adequately represented, nor can you get the amount of services that you need to make a justifiable case, because guess what? I've been relegated as other, as a Native American. How does it feel being relegated as other on many applications and not even having a space in a box to type for yourself?
It feels like paper genocide, quite frankly. And I think that it could be looked at as being deliberately done, right? In some instances, I think that going back to what I spoke about previously is that, the United States government has this fiduciary duty, this obligation to Natives. And we are the only folks who are relegated to what's called blood quantum, right? Aside from dogs and horses, we are the only folks who need to prove our belongingness to our tribes through this colonial tool. And so if we don't exist, then that fiduciary obligation also does not exist, right? And so with this colonial tool called blood quantum, we can only ever decrease our blood quantum. You can never increase your blood quantum. And so therefore, when we see ourselves missing in the data, missing in the media, it's just a reminder of, again, this broken promise that the United States government made to Native people. And I also want to be very clear here, that responsibility does not end at the borders of reservations. That responsibility it doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah. So going forward, you have to have a conversation, let people know, awareness, resources, things like that. So I want to talk about Shock Nation and have you have an opportunity to share a little bit, because you've got the opportunity to be a voice yourself and to really raise awareness about the issues that are critical and germane to Native Americans. Give me a little bit about that.
Shock Talk, yes. So Shock Talk is a telebehavioral application that connects Native users to Native or Indigenous therapists, ground and cultural humility, right? And so a lot of the things that I was talking about earlier in terms of access, culturally appropriate healthcare, we really aim to meet the need through this application. And so currently we are coding and in beta. We hope to really be able to launch this at the top of 2022. But for now, you're able to sign up on our website at www.urbanindigenouscollective.org. Go ahead and click on Shock Talk. You'll be able to see a demo and what we hope that final product will look like when we're able to launch in the app stores. But please stay in the loop, because it's really important to have access to a tool like this. And we really want to make sure that Native folks are aware of this tool that will be coming into community very soon.
Yeah, I apologize. I said Shock Nation, Shock Talk, forgive me. But listen, when I get to the place of having this conversation, having your voice heard as a Native American woman, and at the same time being in an urban setting, it is hard to have a footprint. And I mean, when you think about all the comings and goings of how diverse New York is, one could easily say that Native Americans are definitely overlooked.
I would agree. We are definitely overlooked, and I think that it's really important to really increase the visibility surrounding urban Indigenous issues and a lot of the different health outcomes that we are experiencing. In particular, Native American women suffer the highest rates of violence, far exceeding women of any other ethnicity within the United States, and more than 4 in 5 women have experienced violence in their lifetime. And we endure violence on an extensive spectrum, stemming from verbal abuse to murder. And murder is actually reported as the 3rd leading cause of death among our women. And in some communities, Native women are murdered at a rate that is actually 10 times the national average. And so what we're seeing here is, again, this lack of data that really perpetuates our invisibility. And so what we're doing about that to really increase the visibility and make sure that community is able to see the footprints, right, that have always been here. We're actually funded to develop and implement the Missing Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, Trans, and Two-Spirit database, also known as MMIW G2TS. And this database really seeks to document the scope of violence experienced by Native and Indigenous women in New York City and the tri-state area, spanning from 1900s to present. And we're really working on developing a task force. It's very important for us that our research is community-based and that it is centered around survivors' voices, whether there's family members who are survivors or survivors of violence or trafficking themselves. As a survivor, it's really important for me to be able to use my voice and my testimony to really ensure that Indigenous women do have a footprint in our communities. We have always been known as the matriarchs and backbones of our communities, and it is time for our communities to center us.
Yeah. When we talk about missing Indigenous women, it's not a topic that really comes up a lot, but it's real, very real. Give us more in terms of how this is coming about and what you know about it.
Absolutely. So what we're doing right now is really starting to gather data on a number of fronts, beginning with FOIA requests, right? We're really wanting to better understand the research that currently exists. So filing FOIA requests in with a lot of different law enforcement agencies. Unfortunately, we have been denied our FOIA requests by the New York City Police Department, and we're hoping to be able to follow up to really get access to that data, because again, it's very important for us to be able to look at that data that does exist so that we have a baseline. But again, what I shared earlier, we have just this paramount of burden when it comes to violence that our communities are facing. And when we look around, we see virtually no legislation. So that's another part of this project in which we are creating a policy tracker that will really be able to show folks where policy is supporting Native women, in particular around missing and murdered, and really be able to increase the visibility for folks around what our state agencies are doing to really support us. Again, what we've seen is virtually nothing. So we're hoping that by taking this step to create a database, to create policy trackers, we're able to bring these resources to folks and say, look, this is an issue, it is a problem, and we need your support to create resources and a safety net so that our community members aren't missing and aren't murdered.
Going forward, talk to me about what the plan is, keeping your voice active, and how people can also be allies in this time.
Well, we sent a lot of outreach to a number of state representatives in New York to really, again, increase their knowledge around the issue and really share what we're doing in hopes that they can be in community with us and lend their own resources and voices to the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, trans, and two-spirit movement. I think that people don't know what they don't know. And I think it's really important to look around and understand that so-called New York City is what we call Lenape hoking. And the trails we see, the streets we see, the rivers we see have always been native trails, right? And so I think it's important to understand when you look out and you see the skyscrapers, remember that it was the Mohawk iron workers who came down and lived in Brooklyn, who helped build that beautiful skyline that we see today. And so although we have been, I would say, invisible here in this New York City area, we have done a lot to contribute to this great city that we see and experience today. And so I just really want folks to educate themselves. Ask yourself, whose land are you on? Start there. And then ask, how can you be a good ally to Indigenous peoples as we have been good allies to non-Indigenous peoples?
Sutton, that's all the time we have. I want to thank you so much for being a guest here. And of course, you have an open forum to come on back and share with us as we talk about this very important topic of Native American and Indigenous people. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Daren, for having us. We really appreciate it.
All righty, Sutton King, our guest here. Listen, we've got to go. We got more show. Stay with us. We're going to return. Social justice forums will continue in a few. And welcome back to the show. The Metropolitan New York Synod is the regional division of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America and encompasses 190 parishes in all 5 boroughs of New York City. MNYS is celebrating each of the women leaders in coincidence with their 50-40-10 anniversary, in acknowledgement of 3 important milestones the Synod has overcome including 50 years of female leadership in the U.S. Lutheran churches, 40 years of biopic female leadership, and 10 plus years of LGBTQIA and female leadership. Joining me now to share a little bit more on the details of this matter, I'm joined by the pastor and of the Church of the Abiding Presence and member of the MNYS Council in the Metro New York African Descent Lutheran Association, the Reverend Jeanine Owens. And thank you so much for being with us, Reverend Owens.
Thank you so much for having me.
Good to have you. And a very important milestone, as we talked about, for the group. And so share with us a little bit about this milestone.
Yes, well, 50 years of female leadership in our nation of the Lutheran Church, ELCA, and 40 years of Black and Brown female leadership within the Metro New York Senate, and 10 years for the LGBTQIA female leadership as well. We stay connected to the communities that have not had their voices heard, and we are keeping in alignment with the societal trends. And this is the beauty of Metro New York Senate. We address the diverse needs of all our communities.
When we talk about the work that you're doing, much of that work is centered on inclusivity. And what's that been like, the fight for inclusivity? Give me a little.
You know, as being a woman and a woman leader of Metro New York Senate, it has been a joyful, and also it can be challenging. You know, we have to deal with some of the issues of women not having a voice. And this is what Metro New York Senate does. It is an advocate for having all voices heard, especially during times such as this, in this pandemic, in COVID-19, and everything that has been going on in our world and in our communities.
You have a group called the Anti-Racism Committee that's really dealing with this topic indeed. And when we look at what's happening right now, whether it's Charlotte, North Carolina, whether it's Minneapolis, whether it's Atlanta, Georgia, there's racism, there's bigotry, there's hatred. Talk to me about the work of your Anti-Racism Committee.
Well, the Anti-Racism Committee has been very instrumental in implementing strategies to train our congregations and our leaders. And that was started back in 2016. There was a training to 80 plus congregations in Metro New York Senate. And out of that anti-racism, there are other groups such as the Black Pastors Group of Metro New York Senate, who is currently at this present moment in conversation with our Bishop, Bishop Paul Eggensteiner, who has made anti-racism an important strategy for the church. And out of that, we've talked about equipping our church with mental health, community health, and partnership with other agencies that can help us to move past this terrible time that we're finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel for the vaccinations and things of that sort. But we are trying to, as the Black Equity Table, trying to focus on programs for young adults. We're trying to focus on supporting adult literacy programs and talking about many of the training programs, installing training programs for the youth in our communities, specifically in the community that I serve in, which is the Soundview community.
I want you to take a few moments and talk about your advocacy that goes on with regards to rights for gay and lesbian people. We know that there has been this ongoing push for equality, and at the same time, there's been a whole lot of pushback, resistance, and even we can say hate crimes that have been targeted against gays, lesbians. But give us a little bit of the work that you're trying to do in terms of reaching the gay and lesbian population.
Well, right now, I can only speak of the work that's being done by the advocacy team that we have as part of Bishop Eggensteiner's 2025 vision. We do have many constituents who are working to be advocates as far as the migrant children, which is the Amparo program that we are trying to place and find homes for children that have been misplaced by the violence that they're experiencing in their countries, coming without parents. And some of them have been, some of those children have been separated from their parents and have come to this country not having any type of knowledge of our language and nowhere to go. So I know that Mr. Christopher Varega, who is the lead person in the advocacy committee, is working hard to speak for such issues of people who don't have a voice, and people who are finding their voice and are speaking out, and giving our Senate a wider look at the work that's being done by that community, the LGBTQIA community.
And also, when you talk about being an advocate, I know that you also do work with domestic violence and the Domestic Violence Awareness Task Force. How are they working, and what does that consist of?
Well, that domestic violence task force looks to be a resource for those who are experiencing any violence in the home, women and also men. And they're working together with them as a resource so that people, when they are experiencing any type of violence or any type of situation that is uncomfortable, giving them the resources that they need to use to be able to get out of that situation, to be able to find a way beyond that and not have to stay in that environment. So our Senate is looking for ways to help those to find a better way and a better life outside of the violence of their homes.
Oh, beautiful. And so for people who want to find out more information about the Synod, what do they do?
Well, you can go to our website at MNYS.org. And there you will see everything that we're involved in and our stand on the various issues that we are facing today as a community and as a world.
What is it like to be a part of an organization that does that is actually connected to many of the issues? You have immigration, domestic violence, gay and lesbian rights, and to be connected to a group that has a voice and is making their voice well known.
It has helped me to develop my own voice. Mm-hmm. As a woman, and as someone who not always, being a pastor, I wasn't always front and center. But as time goes on and as you deal with the people and you minister to people, all those experiences form you, and they form who, you are speaking for the people. You are an advocate for the people, and whatever situation they may be in, you're ministering to those people and trying to give them the necessary resources that will help them to build themselves up and to build their family up and their communities.
And so having a voice, and you being a voice right now, talk about the work that you're doing as pastor and the congregation that you represent.
Abiding Presence is a mission church, and Abiding Presence has a food pantry, but out of that food pantry derived a program called Soup for the Soul. And for the second and fourth Wednesday of the month, we have Soup for the Soul. And we had that prior to COVID. We had a lot of immigrants who come and partake in a nice lunch at 12 noon, and they talk, they get to know one another. They talk about their situations and how they're looking to become permanent residents. And we also have those who do speak English because, yes, that is an issue. They translate for us, and we fellowship with them, and we give them a place to come twice a month to have a good lunch, a good hot soup lunch.
And so being a part of the community and being connected to the community, I know that's a huge thing for you, being able to meet the needs of people. It's a part of your history. It's part of the history that we talked about before with the 50 and the 40. So share with us a little bit about that, the history itself, and what that means to you.
Well, the history of the church really began to include diversity, to include diverse people. It started out with a German monk who felt that his voice should be heard about the reform of the Roman Catholic Church. We have his example of when there is a specific need that people always rise up, and people rise up to meet those needs. The church is a place where people can come to be ministered to feel that they belong, to feel that they have a voice, that they can share all their experiences, that they can grow, and that their families can grow, that they will have opportunities that they may not have, opportunities that they might not have. And these are the things that we advocate for, so that people can have opportunities to be trained, to be leaders in the church, so that those same leaders can go out into the world and become advocates for other people, that they can go out into the world, they can make a living and build up their families, so that we can all enjoy our country's, the fruits of our labors.
Reverend Jeanine Owens, I want to thank you for joining us here on the Social Justice Forums, an opportunity to hear about some of the great work that's going on. Thank you for being our guest.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan.
Reverend Jeanine Owens, thank you again. Want to let you know that we're glad to have you here sharing with us about the work of the Synod. Okay, well, we've come to the end of our show today, and yes, we've had a great discussion. We hope you've enjoyed the discussion. We invite you to join us next week as we continue to up the ante, having more conversations about social justice as well as anti-violence. Now, if you want to rewatch the episode, you can watch that on the Recablecast right here on BronxNet TV at BronxNet.org. And of course, if you want to join the conversation, present your point of view, feel free to join us anytime on social media at BronxNet TV. I'm Daren Jaime. Until the next time we meet, Take care and God bless.